Library. Oh, should I start over again? Okay, so this is Beth Tillinghast. She's the librarian here in the Desktop Network Services at Hamilton Library at University of Hawaii in Manoa. She will be speaking with us about institutional repositories. So we can welcome her. And
thank you very much.
I'm going to give you the slide.
Oh, great. You
can't
can't see this, but I'm being presented with a gorgeous purple crown flower lei. Thank you.
I picked and sewed it today.
Oh, hand done. Thank you. Okay, yeah, I've been asked by this chapter to come and just talk about our institutional repositories and a little bit about the background and what we're doing. So that's what I'm going to do. And I just wanted to start out briefly, make sure everyone knows what an institutional repository is. And it's basically just a database system that works with digital objects the way that libraries traditionally have worked with objects. The system will store items so people can search for them. It organizes items and allows people to retrieve different digital objects. And those objects can be images or text, audio, video. All different kinds of file formats are supported. So the system basically provides a home for our research output at our institution. And they can be articles, the items can be articles or technical reports, dissertations and theses, and we're exploring archiving data sets as well. It's one of our newer projects. And the organizational purpose for having a repository is to increase the delivery speed of research. You may know that it can take up to a year and a half once you finish a research article in order to finally realize it to be published. And if you use an institutional repository as a publishing platform, it can be a very much enhanced delivery system so that you can get the research out there a lot faster. And also, by depositing research into an institutional repository, it increases the impact of that research. More people will have access to it, they'll read it, they'll cite it, so your impact is greatly enhanced. And there actually have been a number of studies done by different people that show that with publishing your items in an institutional repository, it does in fact increase not only the citation rate, but the research impact. So this has been supported by research. And also by putting your research into an institutional repository, it can showcase the unique research that goes on at various institutions. And it can help centralize digital collections. Very often they are strewn across campus and on different computers and different platforms, but a repository can help bring those together. And many universities produce a large amount of gray literature, those technical reports and bulletins, the extension bulletins that agricultural departments produce, and oftentimes that kind of literature doesn't find a home in regular publications. So a repository is a wonderful place to house that kind of research. And an institutional repository also provides open access. And just really briefly, you probably know about the open access movement that's happening internationally. And the whole drive is to increase access to research for people with few copyright restrictions, and basically free for those who are trying to access the research literature. In fact, there are all kinds of policy changes that are happening now. Government funding agencies are starting to require research that is funded by that institution to be housed someplace in an open access environment. So just a little bit about the background of the UH Manoa developing our institutional repositories. We started looking at repository development back in the fall of 2006. And the motivation to start looking at the development of a repository came from some of the faculty members, mostly in the sciences here on campus. They approached the head of our IT division at the time and asked him to start exploring the development. They wanted to start using a repository on campus to enhance their visibility of their work, basically. And also our head of IT at that time thought that he had a vision that by the library developing and hosting an institutional repository, it would put the library, even more in the center of the mission for the university. So then we began looking at some of the platforms, and because like many libraries we have a very limited budget, we looked at some open source platforms, and at the time those were ePrints and Fedora, and then the DSpace platform. And we did choose the DSpace platform, and some of the contributing factors for our selection were a prior affiliation with other DSpace repositories that some of our administrators had. We looked at the kind of staff we had, the number of staff we had, and the various platform requirements, like Fedora at the time was pretty high-end in terms of needing a lot of technical support, and we just didn't have that many people who could support it. So, because we had one librarian, that was myself, and about 50% of my time could be devoted to this at the time. We had one APT, she was also a librarian, and about 30% of her time could be devoted to it. And then we had a systems administrator who could devote about 5% of his time. So, because of that, and also because DSpace has a really strong federation, a lot of open source programs kind of come and go, but DSpace is really strong, and it has a dedicated federation. So we ended up going with DSpace for those reasons. So we started with a pilot project in the spring of 2007, and this is when we actually tested and implemented our DSpace, which we call ScholarSpace. And we decided to go with just a couple pilot projects first, and these were from the ethnobotany. They have an open access journal, the Ethnobotany Research and Applications, and they were some of their faculty had been asking us to develop a repository, and the same thing is true for the Hawaiian Entomological Society. They have proceedings that they had been publishing, and they wanted to find an online open access platform for their publication. So we decided to go with these two pilot projects because there was strong faculty interest, and the faculty were already aware of what was happening with open access, and they were familiar with what institutional repositories could do. And most of the documents, well, all of the ethnobotany documents were already digitized, and the current proceedings were digitized, so we thought that would be easy to start with. And we also, both of those faculty members worked very strongly with our library liaison in that area, so we thought these would be a perfect match to start with, and in fact they were. So, like I said, ScholarSpace is a DSpace instance, and this is what it looks like now. It is the latest version of DSpace, which is 1.8. And when we first rolled it out, it looked very much like DSpace out of the box. But in 2011, one of our staff members did a redesign, and I think greatly enhanced its look and functionality. And you'll see we have kind of the ScholarSpace spotlight, where we feature different communities and collections within the repository. We have rotating images, and we change those from time to time to highlight some of our various communities and collections. And you'll see here that DSpace has both a browse and search features. So this is basically what ScholarSpace looks like. And I wanted just to touch on content recruitment, because it has been quite an issue as repositories have been developing over the last 10 years. In fact, if you do a search, you can find numerous articles on content recruitment and how difficult it is, and different ways of going about trying to overcome a lack of content recruitment. In fact, if you go and look at, I sometimes will go and look at like lists of repositories just to get ideas about what we can do and maybe some enhancements we can make, and I will see repository after repository with very minimal items in it. So it is, in fact, an issue out there. However, we haven't had quite the problem. In fact, we've been kept pretty busy with finding content for our repository, and I think some of the factors that encourage recruitment is, one, strong library liaisons. We've had a few of our library liaisons that have been very active in working with their faculty and spreading the word about the repository, and that's helped a lot. Now, that being said, we could be even better in that area, but something to work on. We also have had some strong faculty supporters. As I mentioned, it was faculty on campus who asked us to develop the repository in the first place, and the word has just gotten around. And so we're contacted all the time by faculty members wanting to develop communities and collections within the repository. And he really only spends about 5% of his time. But so because we have the strong staff, we can support more communities, more people wanting to develop collections, and we have a pretty good number of students that we can use to put some time into giving you their content. And we try to interface often with our faculty across campus. We've done brown bags. We've done all kinds of presentations. We'll go to department meetings when we can, talk in classes. And this just spreads the word that we have the service there. And once people know that the service is there, the repository is there, they become, and see some of the things that departments have done, they become pretty excited about what they could potentially do. And so I just wanted to show you a few examples of some of our collections within the repository. This was the Proceedings of the Hawaiian Entomological Society, one of the first pilot projects. And these items go all the way back to 1905. When we first started with them, we were just working with the last 4 or 5 years of the proceedings. And then one of the junior researchers there became really excited about having this information online, and using his own time and his own equipment, he went back and digitized all the proceedings back to 1905. And so that's why we have such a nice, complete collection, thanks to his dedication. Another is the Center for Pacific Island Studies. They have over 1,800 items in the repository. One of the most important items, the collections they have, is the Contemporary Pacific, which is an online journal. And they have subscription, but they also have it online as well. They also have occasional papers, and they're putting their student research in there. They're very excited about the repository. The College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, CTAR, it's an important college here on campus. They have over 1,000 items in the repository. They have conference proceedings and a lot of gray literature in their publication series. And they do have a lot of this online, but they were just insecure about having it on their own server, and they wanted it in a secure archive. So then, this is kind of funny in that when we first started talking with these folks, they were pretty tentative about, putting things in the repository, because they said, well, we do have it online. And then they realized that, I think maybe their computer crashed at one point, and they contacted us again and said, well, let's talk again about putting things in the repository. And it took quite a few conversations to get them to warm up, but then when they did, by the time the publishing coordinator left, he was so involved in this project that he was doing all of the metadata. He did not have a library background. He said, I'm the subject specialist. I'll create the metadata for this. So it was really exciting. It was a lot of fun working with him. And currently in Scholar Space, we've got the hierarchy of Scholar Spaces. You have communities, which might be equivalent to a department, and then underneath that, the community, you can have numerous layers of sub-communities, and then you create collections in those sub-communities or communities, and then you add your items to those collections. So currently we have 43 communities and 341 sub-communities, almost 1,400 collections, and going on 18,000 items in the repository. And our repository, just by the way, is harvested because we pay very much attention to the metadata and want to display it as in a standard format as possible. We're able to, and because we use the Dublin core schema, we're able to be harvested by other repositories. So currently we're harvested by Oyster, which is now an OCLC harvester. We're harvested by an organization called AgNet. It's an agricultural organization. OLAC, which is an endangered language organization. GWILA, the Greater Western Library Association, harvests our Water Resources Research Center for their Western Waters repository. And Policy Archives is another group that harvests our East-West Center policy documentation. So that's pretty exciting as well. I mean, not only, it's just what it means is it allows you to distribute your research even further afield, and it can be that much more findable by people. Repository statistics are important, and the DSpace platform does provide a stats program, and that's the one that we're using. It will show and list file downloads, metadata views, visitors, there's object counts. They organize the stats to tell you what your top collections are, your top items, the top cities that are accessing your research. And I've got to say that it's great that there is a stats program with the with the platform, but it could be better. More granularity in the reports that it could generate would be nice. Others have developed, in the DSpace global community, have developed stats programs. One's particularly good, but it's a group that actually is providing add-ons and modules for profit, and we couldn't. I found out it was $10,000, and I said, we can't do that. So, but the DSpace Federation is also, they understand the need for stats, and they're actually continuing to work on fine-tuning the DSpace stats program. And you know, it's really important for a lot of our community folks in ScholarSpace, because they use the stats to secure funding for their projects, and so we try to stay up on this as much as possible. And I just wanted to throw, there's also a worldwide institutional repository ranking. It's out of Spain. It's called Cybermetrics Lab, and they rank the repositories throughout the world. And I looked at last month, and DSpace was ranked 39th, and then today I looked at the U.S. Institutional Repository rankings, and we're number 23, so I'm pretty proud of that. We also, after we rolled out ScholarSpace a few years later, we started realizing we had the need for another repository, because the focus for ScholarSpace is UH Manoa scholarship. But it just became evident that we really needed a place to put scholarship on items of interest that were not necessarily an output of UH Manoa, but that someone here on campus kind of had guardianship over that information. So we developed, in 2009, we developed Evolves. And also because of our additional staff that I mentioned, we were able to do that. And these are some examples of some of the collections in Evolve. For example, we're involved with the National Digital Newspaper Program, which is a national endowment for the humanities, grant funding. And the goal of that program is to digitize several of the newspapers from every state in the U.S. And so you can go in, their whole program is called Chronicling America, and so their website, it's really interesting. It's a great teaching resource. So I think currently they've got like over 4 million pages in the program, and they've digitized 25 states. Well, Martha Shantini, the head of DNS, has applied for several grants, and we've received that. So we have a large collection. In fact, this is our largest. We have over 19,000 items in this NDNP collection. So, and so we've gone back and digitized some early examples of the Daily Bulletin, the Independent, Sunday Bulletin, the Honolulu Republican. So it's kind of interesting to go in and check it out and see what's in there. Some of the advertisements were really funny back then. Another example is the 100th Infantry Battalion. Now, this was a group that formed during World War II. And after the war, they came back to Honolulu and decided to form their own organization. And so they started producing a monthly newsletter starting, I think, in 1946. And so we have these items, most of these items, in the library up in the Hawaiian collection. And we had talked with them a few times, and they really had wanted to figure out a way to get these online. And they were talking about digitizing and then putting them on their website, but they didn't have a lot of the technological skills needed to do that. So somehow they got our name, so they came to visit us, and we said we'd be happy to host it. So we've worked with them. They paid for most of the digitizing, and So we now have, I think there are about 500 items up in the, it's called the Puka Puka Parade, the newsletter is. So it's kind of fun to go back and look at that. Another example, oh, this was fun, Mana'o. Through various listservs, this Dr. Alex Golub, his name is here, he's one of the professors of anthropology here, and a number of years ago he decided to run his own repository. He used the ePrints platform. He got this little Mac cube, and that's what he installed ePrints on, and he was collecting anthropological research mostly in the Pacific area, and he was working with a librarian then at the University of Washington. Now he's at University of Oregon, and they were putting together this repository, but he just couldn't handle it anymore, couldn't keep up with the maintenance, and so he lamented the fact in some listserv, and someone who was on the listserv said, wait, you're at University of Hawaii, don't you know about ScholarSpace, your own institutional repository? And he didn't, so they said, contact them. So he contacted me, and we were able to extract the data from the ePrints off the Mac Cube and massage it and get it into eVolves, because it isn't our scholarship, but he here at the university is kind of managing this, and so that's been a fun project. Oh, and then another one was is the Historical Society annual reports, and they have different reports and papers and reprints. And once again, this information is not UH Manoa scholarly research, but we have this information in the library, and it's heavily used, and so it makes it for a great candidate to go into a repository. Really quickly, the eVolve staff, because I realize my time is starting to come to an end. There are 78 communities there with that many collections and almost 23,000 items, and its ranking was 88th, and that was out of 1,500 repositories, so you know that's really good. And then another project that we started last year, well, one of the early our ScholarSpace APTs left University of Hawaii at Manoa, went to Kapiolani Community College, and she knew when we originally talked about developing ScholarSpace, we said we're going to start with UH Manoa just to make it manageable, and then eventually we'd like to spread out and be able to expand and develop repositories for UH system schools. So she contacted me early last year and said, we're ready to do this. I think they still are undergoing accreditation, and she was in charge of a lot of documentation, and she said, we really want to archive it into a repository. So we worked with that school and developed the UH System repository. And since then, Honolulu Community College they're just starting to develop their community in that repository. I've also spoken with UH Hilo and Leeward and West Oahu. So, in a few more years, I think we'll see a lot of the schools involved in the UH System repository. And it's an instance of DSpace, and we're hosting it. So we're providing a hosting service for those schools, which is, that's kind of fun to enter in those kinds of agreements. So, yeah, Kapiolani, mostly accreditation items. They're going to use it more for administrative documentation, meetings, policies, that sort of thing at this point. And then some upcoming projects that we have will be the further development of the UH System repository. I mentioned we're exploring archiving data sets. You'll be hearing more and more about something called eScience or eResearch, where institutions are realizing, and funding institutions are realizing, a lot of money goes into providing grants for research, and then the output is usually just an article with a couple of graphs that represent that data, but there's massive amounts of data behind the scene that can be reused if it was put in an open access environment. And so, in fact, now the National Science Foundation requires a data management plan as part of the grant application, and part of that plan is where are you putting your data once it's finished. It has to be in a repository, in an open repository system. So we're exploring all that. It's very exciting. We're also trying to expand our dissertations and theses. Right now, PhD dissertations are required to be submitted to the graduate division. Master's theses, it's optional. We'd like to explore making those mandatory as well, because I've been working with more and more departments on campus who want their master's Plan A and Plan B research in the repository. And also, we'd like to see the research data, once again, that backs up that research as supplementary material going into, being submitted to the graduate division and then going into the repository. So that's exciting. And we're also really encouraging different departments to get their student work in the repository. And open access policy, I don't know if you've been hearing about this. More and more institutions, although really it's still just a handful compared to the potential, are developing open access policies whereby the research that is the research output from an institution needs to be deposited in their own institution's repository or another open access repository at the time of publication. And there's a lot of discussion around this, but I just found out 2 days ago that our Chancellor has signed our open access policy that I've been pushing through the system for 2.5 years. So that's really exciting. But it will have implications on the repository and the kind of service that we're going to have to provide. We'll have to reach out more to faculty and follow through with getting their articles in the repository. A lot more work, but really very exciting. So you can see why I really love my job. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Yes.
When you say another institution harvests a record from here, does that mean that record now is in their repository as well?
Yeah, or
it's duplicated.
Well, it's the bibliographic record is duplicated.
So it's a citation.
It's a citation, yeah, and then so it'll link back to, they can click a link and it'll come back into our repository.
Okay,
so the item really isn't duplicated.
I see, okay.
Yeah, but the bib record is.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a question.
Oh. How much time does it take to promote marketing per week on average? Okay, so the question, how much time does it take to promote and market the repository per week on average? I would say probably at least 3 hours, and that's an average. There's some weeks where that's all I do. And we are always involved with Open Access Week, which is happens the last week of October every year. I think this will be the 5th year, and so we do lots of work around that at that time. Okay, another question: do the users ask for or need training, or is it pretty intuitive? If you're pretty computer savvy and if you've used different programs, it's pretty intuitive. But we also do provide training. I've got, in fact, I've got documents that I pass out. They're available online. How to work with the system. I do, like when I'm going to work with the e-tech class in a couple of weeks, and I'm doing an Illuminate presentation for how to prepare their documents and then submit their documents to ScholarSpace. So, yeah, it's like a variety. It depends upon the users. Another question. I was taking a look through the DSpace site and didn't notice documentation right off regarding what database structure it is built on, SQL, PostgreSQL, etc. Do you happen to know right off what it is. I believe it's SQL, but I don't play behind the scenes, but I believe it is. There's a DSpace wiki, and if you go on just do a Google search for DSpace wiki, then you can go in and find all your technical questions answered. You're welcome. Yes, Philip.
So a lot of the journals that we hosted through the repositories are indexed, but they don't show up as full text. Like if you're in like an EBSCO database, it doesn't show up as full text. So do you know if there's any talk about open access being integrated into like the aggregated databases?
Well, some of them are looking into open access, yeah. With this whole open access movement, publishers and aggregators are realizing that they need to be more open. And so the different systems are slowly changing. Some are, some aren't. Yeah, those are the kinds of things I think you'll see more of in the future. Yeah, the whole scholarly publishing world is in flux right now because of all the open access movement and because of the government, federal funding agencies' requirements. And so you'll see things changing probably for quite a while. It'll be interesting, kind of interesting to follow it. Yes?
Does DSpace instances all use the same terminology, like communities?
Yes. It's pretty.
It's universal.
Yes. Yeah. That's built into its system. So because we had looked, the word communities is kind of confusing at first. Yeah. And so we actually looked at, when we did our redesign, that was one of the things that we were looking at. Could we rename the terminology? But you'd have to get into the guts of the DSpace platform so deeply that it wasn't worth it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we come up with much more of a mess probably. But yeah, it's true, and we understand that. And so when we work with people, that's one of the first things I talk to them about is about the hierarchy and how it's organized, and, the terminology. Yeah.
I was just curious about gray literature. How is that cataloged or in the subsets? Is it in the community?
They're like, one of them is the Water Resources Research Center. So if you go to that community, they have their literature organized. They have all kinds of categories of technical reports. They have a technical report, special technical reports, memorandum reports. I think they have about 6 different classifications. But in the Dublin Core metadata schema, we give it a type, and the type is report. So if you want to go to ScholarSpace and just search on all the reports, you could do that. Yeah, and then basically all the CTAR publication series, they're all reports too. And we have the PCSU, Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit. They have a lot of their technical reports on there. Yeah, and it was interesting, the WRC folks came to us and they said, we just cannot keep up with requests, because they had their own library of all their technical reports over in their building, and people would, they'd search online. They had the abstract listed and the author and the title, and so people from all over the world would write in and say, we need a copy of this, we'd like a copy of this. And at first they were sending them free, and then it just became too expensive, and then they hated charging, because a lot of times these people were writing from developing countries. So, the director came and said, is there any way we could get these up on ScholarSpace? So that was one example of, they paid for 2 different things. They paid for one of our students to digitize and do the metadata and get the information up. And then in another project with them, I helped them train one of their students to do the work. So, and they were so happy. Because now, and they use it all the time, because the director will call me and say, yeah, Scholar Space is down. We need it. I've had 2 people already asking me, to access something. So he's great. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.